Good afternoon. We're going to call the meeting of the State Allocation Board to order. It is 4:05. Some housekeeping. Just this meeting is being held in person in the auditorium of the East End Complex located at 1500 Capitol Avenue for anyone that would like to provide public comment in person. This meeting is also being conducted by way of Zoom for members of the public that would like to participate remotely. In order for this meeting to run efficiently, for those participating remotely, please note the following guidelines. All attendees will be muted during the meeting. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature in the Zoom meeting interface. I will call your name at the appropriate time, and OPSC staff will request to unmute you. Also, if you are calling into the meeting and not using a computer or the Zoom application on a mobile device, you will be unable to provide public comment at this time. I, Michelle Peralt, have been appointed as a permanent designee for the California Department of Finance, and as such will serve as chair of this board. Before we establish a quorum and start with our agenda items, I did want to take a few minutes to thank the former chair of the board, Gail Miller, who is here today, and we'd like to present her with a resolution in acknowledgement of her dedication and service to the State Allocation Board. So, Gail, if you'd
come all the way up there.
Well, I can come down to you, but before we do that, just a few. At least stand, Gail. If you'll stand, that would be great. Just before it's presented, just a couple of things to note. Ms. Miller was appointed by the governor as the Chief Deputy Director of Policy for the Department of Finance in May 2019, and she began serving as the designee for the Director of Finance on the State Allocation Board at that time. During her tenure as the chair, between May 2019 and January 2024, Ms. Miller assisted the State Allocation Board in making apportionments and unfunded approvals totaling more than $7 billion for more than 2,300 school facility program projects and apportionments totaling nearly $683 million for more than 200 projects under the California Preschool, Transitional Kindergarten, and Full Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program. She's been an instrumental member of the board in approving the proposed regulations to aid school districts in responding to challenges that were associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And in recognition of these contributions as chair of the State Allocation Board, we really expressed our gratitude for your commitment and wish you success as you move on to your new endeavors. And before we present it, if it's okay, I'd like to just say a personal note of thanks. Gail, I've been with finance just under 2 years, and Gail has been nothing but supportive in providing me with background and helping me to move into the position that I'm in now. And so for that, I thank you, both as a colleague and as a friend. And so just if we could just take a few minutes, if there's any other board members that would like to make any comments. Senator?
So I know I speak on behalf of my Senate colleagues, but I will say this is the definition of thankless work. And you have, Gail, you've done a wonderful job. You've been a wonderful, calm, sort of smart presence for the Allocations Board. And so you were going to be missed, but thank you for all your service.
I can't let Josh totally speak for me. It should be noted that the resolution was approved on a 7-5 vote. I think that in my dotage as somebody that was a staff member for a great portion of my career, and elected official as well, I have come to appreciate not necessarily what somebody believes or what their theory is, but if they're solid people that can just get the job done and involve other people and have a brain that's operational. And I didn't understand when I entered this career how rare that might be. And you just are that. And so I think it's not just a big loss to the Allocation Board, it's a big loss to the Department of Finance and to state government. And so I wish you well. And it's just, I think the state was just lucky to have you as long as we did.
As a senior member of the Senate delegation, I feel like Senator Laird should not talk for me, so I'm going to talk for myself. I'm gonna fall a little bit short of the Dreen Nazarian tenure of service on the board, but I'm gonna come close. And you've been just an absolute joy to work with, so professional, always bubbly, and most men marry up, but your husband married way up. And I do agree with Senator Laird that this is a tremendous loss for the Department of Finance and the state of California. And I wish you well in your private sector endeavors. And if you ever need a paid intern beginning in December of this year, please consider me for that position. I'm no dummy.
Gail, I just want to, I've been here now going on 2 years, and, it was such an honor for me to be even asked to sit up here. But again, to watch what you do and to know, having served as mayor during COVID time, knowing what you had to deal with during that, that took somebody to a whole nother level. It's something that we've never been trained for, and you handled it so well. And again, I sat here and learned so much in the last year and a half. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I wish you much success in your next adventure.
Well, if anybody has been paying attention since March 2020, Gail has been very involved and has been everywhere, getting the state, helping get the state through COVID, and appearing on behalf of the governor in hearings and committees, and still finding time to come to this board, which might be the most, maybe not the most important board, but the board that has the most direct impact on people's lives. And you were always here, you were always glad to be here, and you ran great meetings. I will say that as somebody who coached against her in U8 soccer, if she and I can deal with all those kids running around the soccer field, she can do anything, and she did it, and she's done it. And I would make Senator Wilkes' comment about her husband, I'd make that into a motion, if that's appropriate. Thank you, Gail, for everything. You brought me along on this board when I joined and taught me a lot. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Gail, it's been such a pleasure to serve with you, not just here on the State Allocation Board, but also on the California School Finance Authority. You've done a tremendous job. We will miss you, but we wish you nothing but success. Thank you.
I think we have some comments online also, or virtual.
Hi, Gail and Alasso. I just want to thank you for your incredible partnership. And you were so gracious to me when I joined DGS to show me around the state. And I had the opportunity to participate on various boards with you. And you've always led with so much grace and intelligence, as everyone else has claimed to. And I look forward to working with you in the future. So I'm going to miss you very much. But I'm so happy and congratulate you for your new endeavors.
Any others? We good? Okay. All right. Well, with that, then I'll come down and present it to you.
Can I come up? Can we take
You
a
can come
picture,
up.
Madam
Yes,
Chair?
absolutely.
Could that was kind of overwhelming and really unexpected. I do think the credit on this board goes to the OPSE staff, Lisa Silverman, Mike Watanabe, Rebecca Kirk, Ephraim, Lisa, sorry, and really the whole team. I think there are people in public service, Senator, that always show up and do more than expected. And I think the examples of Barbara Kampminer before going down to the districts, I think all of you have borne witness to some of that. And so when our paths cross with people that are willing to show up and take the leadership, like your new executive director, like your new chair, it's truly phenomenal, and it's how the work gets done. So those words mean the world to me, and I will definitely make sure my husband really appreciates me. But it is. We all know that this work doesn't get done without phenomenal people, and the fact that Michelle was willing to stand up and take this position is incredible. She actually knows more than I ever did about school finance, and just really grateful that I've had this opportunity, and thank you all very, very much. So if you don't mind for a picture, thank you.
I'll let her take the pics. I'm technologically challenged. Are they close enough? Squeeze in.
Do you mind if I come up there? No, of course. That table's in the way.
Yeah. I'll catch her. Where are you going?
Thank you.
Are we ready, Senator? We good?
You need that gavel. You need
I
that
know,
gavel.
I guess so. All right. Thank you again, Gail, for everything you have done, and we will miss you. So appreciate you.
Now get out of here.
All right, so with that, we will begin this meeting by establishing a quorum. Ms. Jones, will you please call the roll? We are noting that Assemblymember Alvarez, Assemblymember Maritucci, and Director Lasso have joined us from a remote location.
Yes, I will. Senator Wilk,
Present.
Senator Laird, Senator Newman, Assemblymember Morisucci, Assemblymember Davies, Assemblymember Alvarez, Juan Morales, Jeremy Smith,
Here.
Ana Lasso,
Here.
Michelle Perot.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, just to note, there will not be a closed session at today's meeting. Therefore, we will move on to the agenda. And I believe our first item is our minutes, correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair. Thank you. The minutes for the February 28th, 2024 State Allocation Board meeting are on stamped pages 1 through 12 of today's agenda. If there are no questions, we request that the board approve the minutes.
Wilk moves.
Second.
Are there any public comments in the room or online? No public comments. We have a first and a second. Secretary, will you call the roll?
Senator Wilk.
Aye.
Wilk, aye. Senator Laird. Aye. Laird, aye. Senator Newman.
Aye.
Newman, aye. Assemblymember Davies.
Aye.
Davies, aye. Juan Morales. Aye. Morales, aye. Jeremy Smith.
Aye.
Smith, aye. Ana Lasso.
Aye.
Lasso, aye. Michelle Perot.
Aye.
Perot, aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is our executive officer statement. Ms. Kirk?
Thank you. The Executive Officer's Statement is on page 13 of today's agenda. I'm pleased to announce that we expect to have an upcoming priority funding round at the May State Allocation Board meeting. The State Treasurer's Office opened a bond sale on March 26th, and we do expect that the program will receive proceeds as a result of that bond sale. As such, we anticipate presenting projects currently on the unfunded list for priority funding apportionments at the May State Allocation Board meeting. Once we have confirmation of the amount received from the State Treasurer's Office, we will notice any proposed priority funding apportionments in advance of that meeting. Additionally, at the January 24th State Allocation Board meeting, the board directed staff to provide ongoing updates on the status of research regarding alternative construction cost indices that could be used for the annual adjustment to school facility program grants, and updates related to a potential statewide school facilities bond. Staff has continued to meet with stakeholders, and research is still currently underway regarding the comparison and evaluation of several construction cost indices. We anticipate presenting an item with the results of staff's research on that matter at a future board meeting. With the release of the governor's proposed budget in January, the administration indicated its expectation to negotiate with the legislature on a statewide school facilities bond that could be considered by the voters in the November 2024 election. 2 education facilities bond bills are still currently pending in the legislature. Staff continues to monitor these bills, and we will provide further updates over the coming months. Finally, the next State Allocation Board meeting is scheduled for May 22nd, 2024, as the meeting originally planned in late April has been canceled. I'm happy to address any questions.
Any questions from the board? Are there any public comments on this item? No public comments, and this is not an action item. So we will go ahead and move on to the consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The consent agenda is on stamped pages 15 through 197 of the agenda. I would note that today's consent agenda includes apportionments totaling approximately $183.1 million for 35 school facility program new construction and modernization projects, and $32.2 million for 6 facility hardship seismic mitigation program projects. I request the board's approval of the consent agenda.
Any comments or questions?
Second.
Okay. Are there any public comments on the consent agenda? Without any public comments, we have a first and a second. Can you call roll?
Senator Wilk?
Aye.
Wilk, aye. Senator Laird?
Aye.
Laird, aye. Senator Newman?
Aye.
Newman, aye. Assemblymember Davies?
Aye.
Davies, aye. Juan Morales?
Aye.
Morales, aye. Jeremy Smith?
Aye.
Smith, aye. Ana Lasso?
Aye.
Lasso, aye. Michelle Peralt?
Aye.
Peralt, aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which are our financial reports. Ms. Kirk?
Thank you. The financial reports are on stamped pages 198 through 236 of the agenda. The status of funds report on stamped pages 200 to 201 of the agenda reflects the remaining school facility program funding authority of approximately $1.5 billion. That includes $375 million general fund currently proposed in the governor's budget, which is subject to change in the enacted budget. I would also note that the financial reports section includes information compiled by staff annually based on project information worksheet data, which is submitted by school districts at 3 points during the life of a new construction project. This information is self-reported by districts and has not been analyzed or verified by staff, but we wanted to bring to the board's attention that it is available on stamped pages 217 through 236 of the agenda.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? All right, seeing none, this is not an action item. We'll go ahead and move on to our appeal items. Our first one is appeal of Lassen View Union Elementary School District.
Thank you. The first appeal is on stamped pages 237 through 262 of the agenda. This appeal, as Madam Chair mentioned, is from the Lassen View Union Elementary School District, which is in Tehama County, a single school district that serves K through 8 pupils. The district requests approval of financial hardship status for the design phase of a new construction project and a modernization project based upon other evidence of reasonable effort as approved by the State Allocation Board. In reviewing the district's request, staff determined that the district is levying the maximum developer fee allowable under the law, which is the first threshold for financial hardship eligibility. However, the district did not meet any of the secondary criteria for standard financial hardship eligibility, and therefore submitted this appeal for the board's consideration of financial hardship status based on other evidence of reasonable effort to secure a local match. The district's total bonding capacity is approximately $5,089,000, which exceeds the $5 million threshold set in statute for financial hardship eligibility. Their current bonded indebtedness is 0% of total bonding capacity, which is below the 60% requirement in school facility program regulations. Finally, the district has not attempted a local bond measure since March 2020. At that time, the attempted $2.7 million local bond measure failed with more than 57% of voters voting no on the measure. Typically, the district's matching share for the design phase of these two projects would be approximately $886,000. However, staff found that the district only has roughly $29,000 available to contribute to the projects. If the appeal request is approved, the total financial hardship grant would be approximately $857,000. For the board's awareness, in the history of the school facility program, this board has considered 16 previous appeals, previously requesting financial hardship status based on other evidence of reasonable effort. These previous appeals are presented in attachment C on stamped pages 259 and 260 of the agenda. In summary of those 16 previous appeals between 2003 and January of this year, the board approved 8 of the previous appeals in full, partially approved 3 of the previous appeals, and denied 5 of the previous appeals, essentially evaluating them on a case-by-case basis as the intent with other evidence of reasonable effort for financial hardship. Staff has presented in this item an option for the board's consideration to approve the district's appeal request, which would provide a total financial hardship grant of approximately $857,000 for the design phase of these two projects. If the board opts to approve the appeal request, staff does recommend that the district be required to attempt to pass a local bond measure before they submit a future appeal seeking financial hardship status for the full funding phase of these projects. Happy to address any questions.
Thank you. And I believe that we do have last in view Union Elementary School District Superintendent, Mr. Jerry Walker, who is participating virtually. Mr. Walker, did you have any comments that you wanted to address the board before the board?
I don't think so. Everything that was stated there pretty much sums up where we are. I mean, I would like to thank the Allocation Board and OPSC for taking time to review our application.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the board? Yes, Senator?
I had a question, and it had to do with the this coming in two pieces, and the recommendation being that the second piece not be considered until there was a bond measure considered. And these are really small amounts of money relative to what we do in the universe. My question was about the availability. If it turns out that we don't have a school bond or legislative appropriation for additional bond money, is that second half subject to whatever the financial availability when that happens? So we would be launching them off into the future and whatever the financial uncertainty is? Or is there something different that applies that means the money would be available when they get to taking that other action?
Thank you for the question. So at this stage, the district's appeal request is just for the financial hardship approval for the design phase of the two projects. But you're correct that eventually they would presumably come in seeking state funding for the full construction phase of those projects. And at that point in time, it would be subject to available funds or a potential future appeal request, depending on how the district proceeds and their status for financial hardship eligibility at that point.
So when the staff report sort of segmented it out, it was segmenting it out the way it already is design and then construction. It wasn't segmenting two pieces of design.
No, it's the design phase for two projects, a new construction project and a
Okay.
modernization project at the same school site.
Okay, and is, now I'm confused slightly, and I'm sorry. Is the second one, though, a second piece of the project that might not be eligible until they attempt a bond? Or is just the construction not eligible till they attempt a bond?
I understand. So to clarify, the staff recommendation on this appeal is that if the board does opt to approve the current appeal today for financial hardship status on the design phase of these projects, that the district should attempt a local bond measure before coming back before the board and seeking potentially financial hardship status for the full construction grant. So essentially, financial hardship status would allow the state to provide more than the typical matching share of the project and up to 100% of the district's typical required local match.
If we were to uphold the appeal on the design part, how long does the design take? Do they design in a year, but it's going to take them a year or two or three to go to the voters, and that pushes that farther off into the future?
Yeah, they'll have anywhere between 12 months to 18 months to submit a full construction app to get back in line for the full grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
This might be a question for the gentleman on the phone, but is there a plan in the future to go to the voters for another construction bond? I know it's been since 2020, so I don't know what, through the chair, I can ask that question of the gentleman online.
Mr. Walker, did you want to address the board's question?
Sure. We had discussed going out for bond in the future. We weren't planning on going as early as this November. But since our last few meetings, if that is the direction of the board, we would be more than happy to explore that option at the earliest convenience.
Can I actually ask a follow-up question, Superintendent?
Sure.
When you talk about going for a bond, and my apologies for not knowing sort of your bonding capacity level off the top of my head, are you guys looking at needing are you looking at a 2/3 or a 55% threshold bond?
55%.
Thank you. The bond that you tried passing in 2020, was that a 55% vote as well?
Yes, it was, correct.
Okay, and I think when we had this conversation when I was doing review, and when we're looking at, the attempt and to see where the loss is, and not knowing, where the economy is going to be coming down there, especially this is during COVID time where I'm sure, probably wasn't something people were looking at in regards to, revenue and that, but is there something that we can do? Because that is my concern, because we know that all of a sudden we go to put the draft out there, and here's the design, and that if it sits there 3 years later, we were just talking about how the increase in the cost is going to be making such a difference. And so is that something that we can actually, at this point, if we wanted to, is approve the design, but also then make an amendment that they don't need to have that chance of a bond, because we know that bonds can be expensive, just to even put that out there for a school district, if they can't even raise the money to do that, and that could be financially hard for them to do that. I'm just trying to see what our options are. Thank you.
Yeah, the board has pre-approved financial hardship status for the full construction phase in the past. Usually it is in very unique circumstances, and most of these have been tied to military-based school projects where they had federal land. We knew the tax base wasn't going to change, so even if they tried a bond, they'd be in the same circumstance. It wasn't a matter of just voter approval, it was more just they knew they didn't have a bond potential.
Other questions? I would just note, I do think, I think 2020 was 4 years ago, and one of the questions I also had for staff was just sort of demographically, if that community is pretty stabilized, if there's been, movement in and out of new voters. Personally, I think that before we see a full request that for hardship, that really I think we need to see that the district has attempted at least another bond, within recent. And I recognize your comment about COVID, but I do think that 4 years is quite a bit a ways in the past. And so I don't know if they've had a long history of trying bonds or if the 2021 was their first attempt, but I do think that from my perspective, from finances perspective, I think we'd want to see an attempt for at least that local match before we look at the full cost of construction hardship. Others? Before I ask for a motion, is there any public comment? Okay, I have no public comment. So I think the motion that staff has recommended, just to clarify, is an approval of the hardship for the design phase only, with the request that the district go back and do a attempt at a local bond prior to coming back to the board for a full request of hardship for construction. So that's the staff recommendation, but is there a motion for that or any other?
Make that motion as you described.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first and a second. If we could get a roll call, please.
Certainly. Senator Wilk?
Aye.
Wilk, aye. Senator Laird?
Aye.
Laird, aye. Senator Newman?
Aye.
Newman, aye. Assemblymember Davies?
Aye.
Davies, aye. Juan Morales?
Aye.
Morales, aye. Jeremy Smith?
Aye.
Smith, aye. Ana Lasso?
Aye.
Lasso, aye. Michelle Peralt?
Aye.
Peralt, aye. And that motion does carry.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Superintendent, also for being available for our questions today. We will go ahead and move on to our second appeal, which is the appeal of Pioneer Union Elementary School District. I will note that Pioneer Union Elementary School District Superintendent, Mrs. Patsy Oxford, is here present today, and if she would like to, she can address the board, but I'll go ahead and let staff present first, and then if you have some comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This appeal is on stamped pages 263 through 293 of the agenda. As you mentioned, the appeal is from the Pioneer Union Elementary School District located in Butte County, a single school district serving K through 8 pupils. The district requests in its appeal accelerated processing and funding of a school facility program application for new construction funding based on an alternative eligibility methodology. In September 2020, the North Complex West Zone fire completely destroyed the district's only school site, Berry Creek Elementary School. Currently, the district's pupils are housed in a neighboring district located more than 30 minutes from the former Berry Creek Elementary School site. The district's appeal request today has several components. They're requesting new construction funding based on alternative eligibility methodology using enrollment at the time of the fire in the 2019-20 enrollment year, and considering the district's lack of any facilities to house displaced students. The district's enrollment at the time of the fire was 56 pupils. The district requests expedited processing and approval of its new construction application in advance of the current projects on the workload list and the applications received beyond bond authority list. The district also requests that the amount of a new construction grant be offset by the design funding previously approved for this project. And finally, the district requests exemption from a regulatory requirement to include classrooms for which a contract was signed for the construction or acquisition of facilities in the district's gross classroom inventory. Staff recognizes that the district faces a unique and unprecedented circumstance with the destruction of all of its facilities more than 3 years ago. We've presented an option for the board's consideration to approve the district's appeal request, which would provide the district with approximately $4.1 million in additional state funding beyond the previously approved design funds. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Superintendent, before I go to questions for the board, is there any comments you'd like to make, please?
Thank you so much for hearing our appeal. And the senator was correct. This board affects millions of children, of families and communities, and especially in rural communities, because the school district is the center of the community. And that's where the rebuild is going to start for our families, is at the school site. And we are looking under every rock and anything we can to find money to rebuild the school. But OPSC, you have been wonderful helping us to figure this out. We are the square peg in the round hole, and we realize that. And especially in a deficit spending year, it's even more difficult. So we appreciate that you're hearing our appeal, and just can't thank you enough for helping us out and figuring out a way around this, because the community devastated by fire. It's got to come back. We're not going to be the only ones. And, we are doing everything we can to make this never happen again. And a lot of districts and other people are learning from our experience. And again, I wish this room was packed, because your group does so much for so many people, and you definitely don't get the recognition you deserve for doing all that. And before I became a superintendent, I was a principal for a long time in Monterey, I had no idea about this process and what the wonderful things that you do. And I've never rebuilt a school, but this is the best part of it, is learning all the great things that are out there and that you do for all the people in your constituents. They, as you said, they have no idea. So thank you, thank you. And if you have any questions, and I know Joe Dixon, our project manager, is on Zoom as well.
Great, thank you. Questions? Yes, one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to thank Ms. Oxford for joining us today, as I know that Berry Creek is a couple of hours away. I had the pleasure of meeting Ms. Oxford over 3 years ago during the North Complex fire, since our CDE emergency services team helps schools along with Cal OES during emergencies. Since then, we've been trying hard to help them to rebuild. And there's been a lot of people that have been helping along the way.
Yes.
I know that I've asked a lot of people to basically volunteer their time to help this school, and they have. But we still have a long way to go.
Yes.
I'm glad that we're here. And, we recognize that we have a program that helps to build schools, to modernize schools. We have eligibility requirements. But the program doesn't fit every situation. And this, members, is a unique situation. I do want to thank OPSC staff for recognizing this for what it is. And again, it is a unique situation, and for recognizing the need for creative solutions. But I think that this money is going to help the district go a long way and rebuild the school.
Yes.
So with that, I'd like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation on the bottom of stamp page 269.
All right, we have a motion, but before we go, is there other comments or questions?
I do have a question. As the superintendent noted, that this is an extreme situation, but it's probably not unique, right? Essentially the same issues in Paradise. And so to the extent that there isn't a current methodology for this scale of disaster, it probably is worth considering. Sadly, it's probably going to happen again. And my question would be, do we need legislation to do that? What would be entailed in sort of adding that as a methodology for future consideration?
Can I comment on the Paradise Fire? PG&E was found to have a part in that fire. Our fire was a fire that had started 3 weeks earlier, about an hour away in the federal forest land, and they refused to put it out. CAL FIRE came to them and said, if you get wind, it's going to go. And they didn't put it out. And 80-mile-an-hour winds came. They lit a backfire to put it out. And the winds came and took the fire down 60 miles an hour. And it went down to Lake Oroville, which is about an hour and a half from where it started, went down, and then turned around, the winds changed, and came back up. Our school did not completely burn the first time, but it completely burned the second time. And we are bigger than the campfire in acreage, 3 times bigger, but not in population. And that is a detriment to us because we don't have that larger population. And the North Valley Community Foundation that we work with calls our fire the forgotten fire, because it wasn't PG&E, it was Mother Nature, and we just, we don't have that huge population to put it right in the forefront all the time.
And again, I appreciate that. I think for rural districts like yours, it's not a question of if, it's when. And so the Allocation Board will at some point in the future be considering a similar scenario, right? So, just future reference, I guess, is something that might be considered.
And it's very different now that the fire happened, as far as they're put out immediately. So have been changes made.
And I think the senator's correct. I mean, I think we all hope it's not again, but it may very well be when. And I don't know if this is something that staff kind of has any background right now that you can speak to, as far as whether, we've talked a little bit about process, or whether this is something you can note and come back to the committee. There may be, I think, at least some interest to have a conversation about statutorily or through regulation potentially, if there's a process we need to be thinking about in the future.
Yes, I can speak to the senator's question. Firstly, I would note, when we refer to the uniqueness of the situation for the Pioneer Union Elementary School District and their Berry Creek school site, we did, of course, as you noted, see a devastating wildfire impacting the community of Paradise as well. In that circumstance, the impact to the school district was a little bit different than what we've seen here in Pioneer Union. Specifically, Paradise didn't lose all of its facilities, so they were able to house displaced students in other facilities that had survived the Camp Fire. In the case of Pioneer Union, they are a single school district, and unfortunately that school was completely destroyed in the fire. And so, to our knowledge, it was the first circumstance in which a school district had a total loss of all of its classroom capacity in a single event. At this time, given sort of the uniqueness of that scenario, we wouldn't necessarily be recommending regulatory changes. I would note, at some points in the past, I believe in the bond measure that was considered the statewide school facilities bond measure considered by the voters in March of 2020 that did not pass, I think it had some provisions that were trying to address some of these kind of natural disasters a little bit more explicitly in the program. But of course, because that wasn't passed by the voters, it was not adopted as a statutory change to the program.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Senator, and then
I want to continue on this, because I think there's a question that we're talking around. And I had the misfortune of being the Secretary of Resources during the Paradise Fire, and I was there 2 or 3 days later, and I was at the elementary school where the jungle gym was the only thing that was left standing. And also in my district, the Cal Poly forestry program in Swanton, which is actually in Santa Cruz County, was completely destroyed by the CZU fire. Everything, the forest land, the buildings, the academic buildings, all gone. And when it came to replace it, FEMA did a little, the insurance did a little, and then it was $20 million short. And so it took the state budget to step up and fill the gap to completely fund the rebuilding. And whether there's one school that survives or one that doesn't, I think the real question is in terms of climate and what happens in these fires in the schools. And it happens other way. In Big Sur right now, the big slide that closed the highway to the south was right through a school district. So some of the students are south of the slide and some are in the north, and half the students can't get to the school. And that's a slide. That's not a fire. And so, but I think the question is what's our policy when somebody's rebuilding and they can't make it with insurance, and they can't make it with disaster aid, is there a role? And what I thought Senator Newman might be asking, is the staff going to take a look at whether there needs to be a change in policy to decide that we have a category or we have points, or, you know, because in that case, you got to know that they've satisfied the insurance, they've got to satisfy the disaster aid, and then is that something we would consider in making it up? And I think it's a matter of time before this comes multiple times, and it might be good to take a look at this before that happens to know what our policy is. And this is not a time that you can necessarily ask school districts to go to the voters because their property values probably just completely plunged. I mean, I'm not this disaster prone, but I was on the city council and just got being done as mayor when our downtown was completely leveled by the earthquake. We lost 60% of the buildings in our downtown. We had a redevelopment district at 503, and it was bankrupt at 505, with nothing but the property value having sunk by the earthquake. So I think this really is worthy of the staff taking a look, and I support what we're doing to help this school district today, but I think we shouldn't wait till there's another fire before we decide what our policy is and how we're going to do this. So I would suggest the staff take a look at this. And it comes in so many permutations. I see that you have a unique one with the one, and then I have a school district that 27% of the students lived in a house that burnt down, and yet most of the schools survived. But they now have a revenue problem. So and if you were asking them to rebuild something, they couldn't do it. So anyway, I just think it's worth taking a look, and I apologize for extending the debate, because we should just vote on this motion and let this person start a 5-hour drive or whatever it is. But, you know, that's something we're going to have to think about before we're right in the middle of it.
Great. Mr. Morales?
I'll just quickly offer my perspective, Senator, since I've been involved with pretty much every major disaster that has impacted schools since 2017 and working directly with them to help rebuild. There have been a lot, and we're doing what we can on the preparedness side, but inevitably there's going to be other disasters that are going to impact schools, and they're going to have to rebuild. The program, the statutes as written, was created back in 1998. I do think that it would be prudent to reevaluate. We've been learning a lot to see if the statute meets the current needs. I'm not sure if that's a policy, rather a statutory, reevaluation to give the board more flexibility. But I do think that, every situation is different. We've learned a lot, and I think that it would be prudent at this point to at least evaluate, or reevaluate, I should say, the existing program as it relates to the numerous disasters that we've been having.
Other comments? Assembly member?
Yeah, I completely concur with the voice over here, and I think it's very important that we look at something like this, especially when it comes to natural disasters. But I want to say this isn't just rebuilding a school, this is actually rebuilding a community. And that's what's so important about that. Families will start coming back, new families will be coming back, new jobs, new businesses. So there's so much more than just building a school, and again, I definitely support this, and good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the board?
I would like to speak, and I also concur with the senator and with Juan Mireles' statement. I do think, 1998, when the statute was written, was a very different time in our climate, and it's time to relook at what we currently have in statute to see if we can retool it to support the increased needs that we see now with emergencies coming upon emergencies, but also as we look at a new bond, how to build a more resilient, statute that can be flexible to address these situations. So concur with my colleagues.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay, do we have any public comments All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the staff's recommendation? Mr. Oh, yes, we did have a motion. Thank you. We had that lively conversation, and I completely forgot. We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second? Second by Senator Wilk. If we could have a roll call, please.
Certainly. Senator Wilk?
Aye.
Wilk, aye. Senator Laird? Laird, aye. Senator Newman? Newman, aye. Assemblymember Davies?
Aye.
Davies, aye. Juan Morales? Morales, aye. Jeremy Smith?
Aye.
Smith, aye. Ana Lasso?
Aye.
Lasso, aye. Michelle Peralt?
Aye.
Peralt, aye, and that motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. We appreciate it. Okay, at this time, we're going to go ahead and move into our reports, discussion, and information items. Are there any?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The reports, discussion, and information items are on stamped pages 294 through 343 of the agenda. The information items, as always, include the latest workload list and applications received beyond bond authority lists. Those numbers are presented as of February 29th, 2024. I'm happy to address any questions the board may have regarding the reports, discussion, and information items.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, are there any public comments? No public comments on this item. Okay, then that brings us to the end of our meeting, and we are adjourned at 4:56.
Congratulations.